Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I was asked to talk a little bit about forest leads, so that's what we're going to be doing today. This was a sound design request, so somebody actually asked me about this and kind of gave me some directions on what they wanted to see. So if you have anything that you want me to do, then either leave a comment or join my Discord server, which I highly recommend you do anyway, and leave a request there in the right channel, tutorial requests. As a channel just for that. I can also discuss it and like respond very easily there as well. But that's some of the places where you can reach me if you have a request on something you would like to see. So without further ado, let's now get right into making some forest leads. Alright, so this is the project that I have. I made a quick kick and bass and some other drums as well. This was just something I made in like 10 minutes, so it's nothing to write home about, but it does sound pretty nice. And then we'll talk a little bit about the 3 leads sound that we have in a little bit as well. So just something very basic to layer our lead sounds on. And you can hear I really left a lot of space open for the main lead sounds to play there, especially with the bass line. You can hear that it's actually a very low bassline, and there's not a lot of mid-range or even high-end stuff going on in this bassline, so you really have the space to work with, which is obviously important in your mixing phase, but it also just leaves it open to be a little bit more exciting with the mid-range of your track. You don't have to the bassline just fill it up and have nothing else that you can put in there. So what I've done is I've created 3 lead sounds that we're going to go over. Together they sound like this, and the real main thing that I focused on was like the layering and how they layer together. So let's listen to the total and we'll hear what that sounds like as well. So very aggressive, very yeah, just FM-y sound, as well as that key force lead sound that we often hear with the sine waves. This one is in key, so I did use the trick of random MIDI generation here, and the MIDI notes are all in key, so you can see that this one sounds a little bit more pleasant because it's in key, but you can also just fill up all the notes, or even do like internote stuff when you use other methods of generating that sine wave, maybe with filter resonance as well. In this case, what I did is just a triangle wave, so that's actually just the MIDI playing. But I'll go over all of the lead sounds right now, and we'll listen a little bit to each of them, and then discuss how to make them and what makes them work. So here we have a lead sound that is made up of the SSQ waveform that I've shown off before, or the SSQ FM type that I've shown off before. A little while back I made a video about that. And this is what it sounds like. Very aggressive lead sound, and you can see it's a very aggressive FM setup as well, with 100% FM setup here. And then here we have our carrier again. As you can see, the whole principle is fairly simple in that we just take that incoming waveform and then we filter it out, and then we distort it. So it's really the FM sound that gives it the kind of the feeling that it has. And something you can do is play with the actual carrier signals here and see what the different types can bring for FM sound. Obviously, depending on what kind of style you're going for, you can decide on which type of basic waveform you use, or even a more complex like wavetable or something, if you want to be really fancy. So yeah, the main bulk of this sound is just this FM carrier, which I've shown off before. I'm not going to go over again how you make this exact sound. What you'll see is it's again just the carrier FMing or the modulator FMing our carrier here that goes to the filter, which just gives it its tone, and then it goes through distortion and a little bit of EQ here. Outside of that, we have some stereo generation here, so pretty mild settings on the stereo generator. And then we just have an EQ here to kind of roll off the extreme high end, because these kind of leads tend to take up a lot of the high end, and it sounds like this if you just filter it, if you don't filter it out. So that's really going to take up all the space in your mix in terms of high end. So to prevent that, I just kind of rolled it off like that. I'll show you later why it's still sounding like there's a lot of high end. That has to do with the processing we do in the group here. But first I want to get into the other two sounds. So something to note here, and something that's pretty interesting, is I've duplicated this channel here. So if we go to both phase bands, you can see that the modulation that we're using is actually the same. And that really helps meld the two sounds together and give them the same tone and the same kind of vibe throughout the track. You might sometimes want to deliberately not do this. So you can have one lead stand out in one moment and another stand out in the other. In this case, what I decided to do, because this one is playing fewer notes, is that this lead just sits on top of it. So you can see it has a louder volume. And it's also a little bit more mono. You can see the settings on the stereo width here are a little bit milder than the other one. So it's a little bit more mono and it's a little bit louder, which means that it sits more in the foreground of the mix. And that kind of obviously helps these notes kind of come through a lot more. And then when they're not playing here, for example, then we have the other lead kind of filling up that space as well. So this is a classic FM setup. So basically what we have here is just a sine wave FMing a square wave. And you can see the kind of waveform it generates here. And that just goes through a bandpass and then a bit crusher. And the bit crusher, I really like the bit crusher because it opens up with really, really nice sounding settings. Obviously I've turned the mix down, but the other things I've all left like this. So that really gives it a gritty high end that can really use, and that allows it to stand out a little bit more in the mix. Again, the high end also gives it more impact, and therefore it sits more in the foreground. So this is really layered on top of that other lead. Then the final lead here, which I just showed off before, it's just a arpeggio. Here a real trick comes from the MIDI. So this MIDI file is filled up with notes, all in the key of D minor, which is the key that I chose for this little example here. And then we just have it play a triangle wave going again through the bit crusher at default settings with the mix down, and then a haze effect for some stereo width. And then we filter it out, kind of similar to the other one, where because of the way we're filtering, we're leaving a little bit of space for our main lead to kind of come in. And then we have a fairly, as you can see, a very short but very wet reverb, which is really adding to the stereo as well as just kind of the ambient feeling of the sound here. So yeah, those are the three leads in essence. Let's close these up and talk about the group. So the group really is about gluing everything together. In this case, normally I don't really like to do that in my own tracks, but for these kind of examples, it's a lot easier to glue things together like this. But basically, the OTT is really what glues it together. So we have a very strong compression on it, and that brings everything in at the same level. If we turn it off, you can hear that some of the frequencies kind of fall away here. Obviously, it's also a lot louder, but you can really hear that it also glues it nicer together. And the higher frequencies in particular just get a nice boost from it. So that's also why, even though this is filtered, we can still hear some of the high end from this lead as well as this lead as well. Then we obviously have the EQ here to kind of just take out the sub bass and to give it a little bit of coloring. And then we go into a saturator, which is just there to clip it off and really make it as loud as it can be. And then we have some stereo processing here. As you can see, nothing crazy, just these four settings which I normally use to set relative stereo of the bands. And then we have the overall width here and using some of the exciters. And then finally we have an echo. Again, this glues it together because it gives it all the same ambient sound. So that really helps make it sound like it was like it's all in the same like room, right? Because of the echoey sounds all sounding similar. If every sound had a different timing on their echoes, it would sound very complex, but it also sounds like really 3 different sounds playing. Where here, because they use the same kind of delay settings, they all have the same kind of room feeling and the same kind of ambient feeling. And then finally we have a sidechain. So those are 3 forest leads and how to layer them. I hope you find this kind of stuff interesting. If you want to see more forest or darker Psytrance sounds, let me know in the comments down below. As I said, requests are always welcome. And if you're new here, subscribe. And if you like the video, leave a like. That always helps the channel a lot. I also want to say a big thank you. Every now and again in analytics, what I will see is that suddenly I get like a 30 or 40 viewer boost or like a boost of those amounts of views from external websites. So that means that people have actually been sharing my videos like on the internet, on Facebook or whatever. And that's really nice to see that people find my stuff so interesting that they're willing to share it with other people is really nice. And I want to just thank you for that. Thank you for doing that. But yeah, that's going to be it for today. Again, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And if you're new, subscribe. And I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.